I'm Clever Ghoul, but you can call me Nikki. Last year, a friend of mine 3D printed these skeleton hand candle holders, and he very generously printed me some. I realized this would be a great project to show how easy it is to go from a one-dimensional flat plastic skeleton to more of an aged, realistic, bone-like look using spray paint, acrylic paint, and some sponge brushes. No fancy materials or equipment needed. This is really great for any skill level. I've done this before with store-bought skulls in my catacomb vase and stack of skulls videos, which I will link in the description. But this time, we're starting from scratch. So with that being said, let's get into it. Like I said, I'm doing this with a 3D print that a friend gave me, but you could follow along with store-bought skulls or bones, any plastic skeleton that you want to take from basic to a bit more aged and realistic. Sandpaper, spray primer. I used Krylon Fusion all-in-one hammered brown, but you could also use a regular brown too. I just like to add a slight texture first. Krylon chalky finish in colonial ivory, Krylon satin finish, craft acrylic paints in honey brown, chocolate brown, and deep gray, sponge brushes and regular paint brushes. You'll also need paper towels and water. And for the base, I used a combo of Liquitex bronze and iridescent graphite. As always, I will have everything linked in the description, and these are affiliate links, which means if you use them, I get a small commission. So if you do, thank you so much. Before painting, I looked over the hands and noticed some spots that needed to be sanded. I recommend lightly sanding your store-bought bones too, so that the paint will stick better and you remove any seams or lines in the plastic. Then I went outside and sprayed on a layer of Krylon Fusion hammered brown. I like to use a brown or bronze primer, so if any of it shows through the ivory, it just adds to the aged bone look. I would do a light coat, let it sit for 30 minutes or longer, and then do another. I ended up doing this about 5 times to cover everything, and then I left it overnight to fully cure. The next day, I applied Krylon chalky finish in colonial ivory, again working in layers, letting it dry and repeating, moving the hands around each time to get even coverage. I let this sit for a few hours so it could fully cure, and then later that night I went in and sealed everything with Krylon satin finish. This will protect the paint from coming off when we do our acrylic paint washes. After that was completely dry, I began the color wash process, starting with my mid-tone honey brown, adding a bit of water to the paint and my brush, and starting to sponge it on. After it would sit for about 30 seconds or so, I'd wipe off the excess with a paper towel. You can see here how it will sort of drip down to the other side. I will wipe that away immediately so it doesn't leave any obvious drip lines. I would sponge a section, then put that hand down and repeat on the other. Then I would go back to the first hand and wipe off the excess with a paper towel. This creates a soft stain on the hand. Ideally, I would let the wash sit on the hand anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes. The waterier your paint is, the longer it can sit because it will take longer to settle in. Also, if you don't like how this looks at any point, you can dip your paper towel in clean water and wipe off what is dried down. Acrylic is very forgiving. I really like to add in a lot of this honey brown as it adds a yellowed, aged look to the hand while still maintaining the brightness from the ivory base. I took my time and did several layers. This is subjective. Add as many layers as you think looks good. And remember that paint often dries down darker than it looks when it's wet. Once that was to my liking and fully dry, I mixed chocolate brown and deep gray together and did the same process. But this time I focused on the deep crevices in the hand, and I only did one hand at a time to really make sure I was building up the shadows where I wanted them to go. Then I repeated the same process on the second hand. Here you can see the difference between the hand that I put the shadow on versus the one that hasn't been touched. I let everything sit for about an hour or so to dry, and then I moved on to the base. I'm going for an old, dirty, unpolished bronze sort of look, so I first applied my bronze Liquitex paint, let that dry, and then went in with a smaller brush to get closer to the wrist. Once completely dry, I sponged on some iridescent graphite paint. I did one coat, let it dry, and then added in another. And after that was all dry, I took everything outside and sprayed with the Krylon satin finish again, which means it's time for the reveal. Here they are. I really love how much these transformed with just paint. I know that you can get a cleaner look with an airbrush, but to me, it's way more fun to do it this way. And who says skeleton hands need to be clean and precise? I feel like they look better when they look aged and maybe dug up. This approach is also accessible to way more people, because really, who's gonna buy an air compressor or an airbrush just for this one project? Not to mention all of the learning curve that comes with that. It's just so much easier to do it with paint. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a store-bought plastic skeleton or pile of bones, but for the most part, they're really flat and one-dimensional. So I love doing this and ending up with something that's just a bit more creepy and realistic. You can do this project with a full skeleton, with just a skull, with a stack of bones, or really any pile of bones that you have. If you're gonna try this out at home, tell me all about it in the comments. I would love to hear. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!